Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rise and Lead Women's Leadership Perspectives. This podcast is about helping you take your leadership journey to the next level. We're so glad that you decided to join us today. My name is ChèRee Wiley. I'm your host, founder and CEO of Diverse Perspectives, where we provide consulting and writing services for your personal and professional growth. And today we have a fantastic episode where we're going to continue our conversation about the leadership journey and what that looks like, and really even kind of provide a little bit of a roadmap on how you can determine what it is that you want to do next. A lot of my viewers are really trying to take their leadership to the next level. They're not really sure if they're on the right path, and they need the support that will help them get there. And so we want to make sure that we are providing these answers for you in the best way we can. And that happens with women who have experienced this journey for themselves and can give you a little bit of advice and let you know how things have progressed for them. Today, we have a special guest, Miss Brayanna Jones. She is here to share her journey, and I will refer to her as Bray throughout this episode just because that is the relationship that we have. But we just thank her for being here. Hi, Bray. How are you?
I'm good, Miss ChèRee. How you doing today, girl?
I am doing well. It is a beautiful day to help somebody, right?
Yes, ma'am. Always, right? It's always a beautiful day to help somebody.
Yeah. So, Bray, if you could tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and your journey.
Absolutely. So, my name is Brayanna Jones, as ChèRee said, and I am the chef of life. And most people are probably like, what does that mean? Well, it's like a life coach, but I call myself the chef of life because, baby, I love to eat. Okay. It is one of the most soul filling things I think you can do. Not just eating, but the camaraderie and the community that comes with enjoying a meal. When you think about birthdays, we all gather around a table somewhere. When you think about anniversaries or any special event that we have in life, it comes with a meal. And so that soul fulfillment, that happiness, the motivation, the passion that I have when it's time for a good meal is what I have in every aspect of my life. And I teach my clients to do the same. And so I am the chef of life, and I teach my clients passion, motivation, and fulfillment. That's what I do. That's my jam.
That is beautiful. And I know that you come into that place of knowing that that is what you wanted to do in this season. It was just a natural transition on your journey. So if you
Absolutely.
could just share us a little bit more about how you got to the place where you're now owning your own consulting firm, and, a little bit of the experiences that you had along the way.
Absolutely. So yeah, this didn't just drop out the sky. This came with some learning, some journeying, some bumps and some bruises, to be honest. My leadership journey started probably very young, where I was raised in an environment that kind of required me to step up and be responsible just a little bit earlier than most. And while some may look at that and say, wow, that's unfortunate, for me, it really helped to mold me to be the leader that I am today. In time after time and experience, I found myself being the one called on to do the thing. And maybe it's because I was responsible. Maybe it's because I was able to speak up. Maybe it's because I just took whatever it was by the reins in order to get it done. But there were just over and over, I just found myself in an opportunity where people were calling me to do a thing. And it takes courage first to step up to the call. So, first, the courage to be like, okay, I think I can do this, to answer the call that's been there on my life already. But then the experiences that come don't always mirror what I think I know about myself as a leader. The experience that come might say, if I was a good leader, I probably wouldn't have done X, Y, and Z in that way. But good leadership also requires you to be a little bit of self aware and be able to step back and say, well, I did my best, and I was still able to help and to show and to guide a thing to the next step, right? So started off as a child where I was always called to do the thing. And then as I grew into my adulthood, the next step of that was taking the courage to do the thing even when I wasn't called.
Mm.
And that's in itself can be a bruise. Because you're like, how do I step up and do something that I wasn't called to? But it was the initiative to see a need and be able to fill it. And so we talked a little bit, and it's not always about the loudest person in the room, but it's about the capable person in the room who can take the things, see the things that need to be done, and really put it into motion. And so then I progressed, and I ended up in a company that really took me in. And I started in the lower level of the company, but I did the thing that I always knew to do. I was always called on, and I was taking initiative in the areas that I thought change was needed, which helped me to go from the lower level of the company immediately to corporate, nothing in between, which was something that was unheard of and hadn't been seen. And so for me, I was a little bit nervous about it, but confident in my ability, because doing that was something I had done all my life, right? I'd already prepared, I'd already become courageous and brave in what I knew that I could do. And so stepping into that was a little bit different. And that was fantastic in a corporate space where there was already outlines for me and already things and goals set for me to do. And so to take it a step further now, I decided to lean into entrepreneurship and life coach full time on my own without my corporate position, which has now required another step of leadership. But this particular step of leadership to me is the biggest step of self-awareness, more so leadership, because it has taught me a lot about myself in order to run my business effectively. It's different than just doing the thing that someone else has called you to do the thing that you have in your heart on your own. So it has been a long and bumpy road, bruised, battered, but here and loving the opportunity to be a leader.
That is so good. And there were some key things that really came out of what you just said. And one of those things is courage. And I think that a lot of times we think that people who run to the call, or who step up to the call, are the ones who aren't afraid. Like that there's never a time when we're uncertain of ourselves, but that's not the case. Like we have to push past it. And so just to kind of to lean into that a little bit more, like what areas, more a little bit more in depth, have you really had to be courageous in that have really benefited you or paid off in the long run?
I would say being able to share my opinions as a woman and as a minority woman in most, if not all, situations that I have been in where required me to speak up and to share my opinion. It was difficult. And people will look at me, I always say, well, you're so confident. I am confident, but I'm not always that courageous. Like I know what I know for myself, but to step up and to have conversations in a room sometimes can, in my mind, be just a little bit daunting. But what I want on the other side is much, much bigger than my fear of moving forward in it. In my corporate position, that's actually what helped me to matriculate in the way that I did. What I did was unheard of. It hadn't been done in the company at all. And this is a Fortune 500 company, right? So I'm not talking about this little mom and pop job. So when I saw the opportunity to speak with who ended up being the VP of the company, I did it. When I saw the opportunity just to say, hey, how are you? How's everything going? I did it. So when it came time for me to promote, he came to me and said, hey, this might be a good opportunity for you, because I put myself in those uncomfortable positions early on. So he said, I trust that you can do well in uncomfortable positions. So here is an opportunity. And that just helped my position to continuously move forward within that corporate space, because I had already said to myself, the fear is not greater than what I want on the other side.
Yeah, that is so powerful about staying focused on what the end goal is, right? And I think that sometimes when we are going through this journey, and as you pointed out, we're not always welcome in every space, right? Like people don't always want to hear our voices. And that's kind of a misconception. If you're waiting for somebody to want to hear you or to invite you to the conversation, that may never happen. But the power of that, of you stepping out in that space of being courageous to say, you know, I have something to say, I have something to offer. And then in that case of the example that you gave, that put the spotlight on you, right? So when the time came for other opportunities, people were like, I remember when she said this, or that she has these great ideas, and I need to be tapping into that. And so the power that comes from just kind of knowing yourself. And I think that, and I mentioned that before, when you have that confidence, as you spoke of, in yourself, it makes it a little bit easier for you to speak up, right? And so you have to get to a place where that self-reflection of being self-assured, as you mentioned as well, you are having those conversations like, I do know what I'm talking about. Like, I have something to say. And because I know what I'm talking about, and because I have something to say, even though I'm a little bit nervous and I don't know how it will be received, I'm going to say it anyway, right?
Yeah,
and so, yeah.
There's so much power in that. And so there's two things I want to say to that, if you don't mind. There's two things. So one thing is what I teach my clients, my number one thing is your core values. What are your values? What do you bring to the table? Specifically women, because a lot of times we allow our titles to supersede us, right? Who are we as a mom? Are we as a wife? Who are we as a manager? Who are we as this, that, or the third title? And so it comes to the point where you have to sit down and really grapple with yourself and say, but who am I? And what do I desire? What do I want? And so the first understanding, you're courageous and you're confident when you know yourself. But let's go back to knowing what your values are. What are the things that you really stand on? We know everybody else's values, right? We know that Chick-fil-A gonna say your pleasure when I get my meal, right? We know that, you know, Walmart gonna make this exchange for me, whether I got a receipt or not. We know what their values are, but a lot of times we don't tap into our own. And by tapping into your values, it gives you what I call your because I said so's, right? Remember you used to ask your mom a question, you ask her, and you ask her, and you ask her, and she'd be like, no. And you're like, okay, but why? And the end of the story was because I said so.
Yes.
And so when you decide that you are who you are, you have your values, and these are the things that you lead by, they're your because I said so, period, end of the conversation. And that's what really gives you the confidence, because you got something to stand on. You feel a little bit more confident, a little bit more bold in these things because I see myself in them. So that's number one. And I think number two, along those same lines, is understanding what leadership looks like for you. Leadership for you is not leadership that is for everybody else. And it's funny that we're having this conversation because this is something specifically I have just been working with one of my clients about, where she stepped into a new position and she said, okay, but I'm not a manager and I see that there's a need to lead here. What does that look like? What I realize is a lot of people don't know what leadership is or even what it looks like. And so the idea is, okay, step back now from assuming management and understand what leadership is, because anybody can manage, not everybody can lead. And so what I shared with her and what I would love to share with your audience is the first thing I would say to do is look up a shepherd. There's a reason why a shepherd is used as an example of a leader, because a shepherd guides their sheep. Okay. So I would invite everybody who's listening to take the time and look up what a shepherd does. And then after you do that, start to pick out some people, whether they're famous and you're just seeing them on Instagram, or they're people that you actually know that model any representation of what a shepherd looks like for you. Then that helps you to kind of understand what type of leadership you're drawn to, what type of leadership you like, what type of leader that you find yourself to be. You know, there's plenty of tests and little things out there that you can do, but I like real life applications because to me, it's a little bit more tangible. And so just those two things. Number one, know your values. What are your core values? It's my jam. That's what I teach everybody. That's what we start with, because to me, that's the most important focus, to be confident in yourself and to be sure of yourself as you start with your core values. But then the second part is understand what leadership is for you and what your definition of leadership would look like.
Both of those were, oh my gosh, so good. Because I said so. That is, it don't get no better than that. And it really is you got to stand on it. And so, you
Mm-hmm.
know, as you talk about those core values and you talk about understanding leadership, and that really is what this whole podcast is about, is to really help clear the fog for women to really understand, like, leadership can look differently, but what does leadership look like to you? And then that tidbit about understanding why the reference to shepherd. I think a lot of us don't really think about that, but there's a lot of references to that. And again, a shepherd doesn't have the title of manager or CEO, founder, but so much powerful insight into the way that they lead their flock. And so that is just all of that, as they say, that'll preach in itself. But just kind of coming back to the core values, if you would share, you know, what are your core values that lead you down the path, even as you are helping to guide your clients in leadership?
Yeah, so my core values are freedom. That's my number one. Okay, baby, don't stifle my freedom, or I'm all off. So freedom, value, purpose, spirituality. Those are a few of mine, and they literally, self knowledge is my last one, and they really align and fall on top of one another. Freedom for me can be anything. It's not everybody's definition of freedom, but and do I feel comfortable in this space? Do I feel authentic in this space? Those things to me are freedom. Those things to me allow me to move and be the best version of myself, is where I feel free in that space. Value, I always am searching to bring value to a situation and to be valued. So if I know that I'm coming, like, here, I am here and excited and happy to be here, and just to be able to bring a little bit of knowledge or a little bit of a different perspective to the audience, to me, that's filling my cup, because I feel like I'm bringing value. My spirituality is always top of the list, right? It's always what I'm leaning towards. And those are the things that help me to be authentic in who I am, to naturally lead, right? I don't look to be the loudest person in the room. I just look to bring value. And so sometimes bringing value means sitting back and listening, and maybe going to talk to someone on the side afterwards, right? That doesn't always mean I'm loud. It just means that I'm going to bring something that might help the room to shift a little bit. And so those things, with that, is what I teach my clients, mainly the understanding of their value and their freedom. Because if you know that you bring something that nobody else in this world can bring to the table, you are the missing piece to a puzzle. If you don't bring you in your fullness and in your authenticity, baby, something is going to be missing. It's like eating a bite of something without no salt. Y'all ever had something you like, something is missing? You know, no salt in it, right? It's like being in something without the salt, because you are missing your piece of the puzzle. So know the value that you bring. Even if you're not a manager, like you said, even if you don't have that title, the title is not what's important. What's important is what you bring and the value that you bring. And so being in a place that you feel like you can be free and authentic in order to bring out your value are two of the top things that I really help my clients to kind of stretch out. And it starts with those core values. It starts with you knowing your core values, because once you know what those are, those kind of help you to say, oh, and this is how I bring value, by living out those core values.
Yeah, that is so good, and it's so true. And you know, that is the biggest misconception, is that people think that just because someone has the title of leader, that they understand how to lead. And we know that that is not the case.
That's so
We
not
have
true.
both been in spaces where leaders were the least equipped to do the job that they have, and a lot of times it's the people without the title who are actually keeping the ship running. And so
Absolutely.
understanding, like you said, when you know your value, when you come to understand and recognize what you bring to the table, and that without you being yourself something is missing, then you will continue to kind of stay in this rut. And you know, I'm sure with your clients, and I've seen this with my clients as well, is this, it's like being stuck in mud, kind of, because you are measuring, the measure that you have set for yourself isn't even an adequate vision of what leadership actually is. So you're actually already doing the activity of leadership. You're naturally a leader. You're stepping into that every day. But because you think you have this misconception about what leadership is, you have trained yourself that you're not a leader. This is just, I'm just doing what I do, or this is just my job, or this is just my personality. But you have something that is needed. And if you were to be removed from the cog, like, would things keep rolling? No, like they're going to stop, because you are a vital piece of the puzzle, as you said. And so that is so good. And I think more leaders need to hear that, but especially women in leadership, which you kind of tapped on, because a lot of times what comes natural to us, a lot of us are naturally internally, we're leaders. We lead households, we lead families. We have been leading our entire lives. We downplay it or don't acknowledge it for the gift that it is, and then we just kind of can't move forward in that way. And so I just think that is just so powerful. Another piece that you kind of pointed out that I would love for you to continue to kind of expound on is what you really think as far as next steps that people can do to kind of empower themselves to grow in leadership. Because we've talked about this before, about how we build our leadership capacity, whether we go to a conference or we, take a course, or we read a book, or we interact with other like-minded women, like each other, how we build each other up and have these conversations, whatever that looks like. What are some suggestions that you would have to kind of share with our audience about ways that they can start to really build their leadership capacity and get some of that confidence?
Yeah, I'm going to say the first thing I'm going to do is stop talking bad about yourself. Okay, because what you just said was so good, is that a lot of us say, well, I'm just doing this. I'm really not the leader here. I'm just doing this. Okay, cut it. Okay, you are doing all the things that you need to do in order to be a great leader. So I want you to stop there and just start giving yourself the credit that is due. Okay, if you don't give yourself the flowers, nobody else is going to give them to you. So let's start with that. Let's start by saying, you know what, I am a vital piece to the puzzle here. I am really playing my part and doing well in that. Because here's the reality, and here's the tea. If you don't recognize your worth and you don't give yourself the credit that you get, once you get amongst leaders, you're going to feel left out. Okay, you're going to notice the strong suits. Leaders are strong, whether it's outward, whether it's inward, it doesn't matter how you see it. Leaders are very, very strong people. And so you're going to get amongst some leaders and start to shrivel up if you don't start talking yourself up just a little bit better. So that's where I would like to start, right? It starts with you. I teach a very self-centered way of living, not in a bad way, but in a way that everything you do starts with you. And then as you move forward, you seek out those things that you enjoy, the things that you are looking forward to in mentorship. And whether they don't have to be physical people that you actually know. I think my first mentor was a woman named Rosetta Thurman. And she teaches, what's it called? A Black woman tribe. She has a Black woman tribe. And what she does is she teaches Black woman entrepreneurship and what that looks like. And I loved her, and I started following her through a podcast because she fed me. She fed my desire. She fed my interest. She was so bold and courageous and confident. So you find a mentor that is really going in the direction that you see yourself in, which is why the Shepherd Project is so important to start with, because you start to pick out those characteristics. And when you see them, you go to those women and say, wow, let me just learn. Let me just be a disciple of what you're doing. Let me get under you and just learn. But you might see a book that might sound good. You might see documentaries. You might see, I'm a sponge. I love to learn and be engulfed in the spaces that really help to fill me. And so that's what I do. And that's what I always suggest. I always tell my clients that what you watch and what you put in your mind is who you end up becoming. So every time that you have the opportunity to start to plug in some of those things of leadership and things like that, the people you follow on Instagram, the things you watch on television, the things you listen to on the radio or through your phone or on podcasts, all are going to start to stir something up in you. So if you put in the things that you want to come out, it's inevitable almost. You just have to be intentional about what you're putting into your body and into your mind.
Oh, that was so good. Be intentional about what you put into your body and into your mind. And
Absolutely.
that is absolutely what it takes to get you to the next level. Every single one of us have followed some sort of a path. If you think that people just wake up good at what they do, it doesn't happen that way. We have seen examples, and I've talked about this before, some good and some bad, but we've seen examples, and if we continue to stay thirsty for knowledge, we will continue to grow in development. That's how growth happens. A plant don't just keep growing because you just stuck it in the ground. It has to be watered, it has to be nurtured. Sometimes you got to prune a little bit and get those little dead pieces off so it can keep growing. And that's the same thing that happens when it comes to leadership. For you to get to the next level, you have to do intentional work, as you said, self-centered work, to understand that the growth starts from within before it's seen without. And so that is, oh my gosh, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking out
Thank
the
you for
time to talk
having
to me
me.
today. Girl, so much. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this myself because this has just been so good. So many great nuggets. So, Bray, you have the Chef of Life consultant, and I want you to be able to share a little bit about that, as well as how people can connect with you in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for having me. This has been an amazing conversation. I mean, it's just been so good. And like I said, it's filling my buckets right now as we speak. So I really appreciate being here. So I am the Chef of Life. I run the Sovereign Life LLC. And right now I am offering group coaching where we are cooking up passion, motivation, and fulfillment. And really what we're doing is we're taking these little pieces of understanding your core values, understanding where you are today and where you want to go in self-awareness, and then helping to build up community that's going to help continue to get you where you're going. And so these are such a great time because it's full of women who are in different walks of life, but we notice that we all have one thing in common, that we're really working towards being the better version of ourselves, and that you can have community with people who don't always look like you. And so it has been a fantastic time doing that. And so right now I have the registration for that is open. You can email me at thesovereignlife.coaching@gmail.com, and I will get you over all the information that you need to sign up for the group coaching. And then we have a free event coming up tonight. So when this airs, it will be tonight. It will be, it's called A Wine and Unwind, a women's virtual conversation series. And we are having an amazing co-host talk to us about what does mom life balance look like. And it's going to be a good time. Bring your favorite glass of wine, cocktail, or mocktail. And it's just like a girls' night in, but virtually on the computer, where we all talk and just get together and enjoy one another. So those are my two big things. You can follow me at the Sovereign_Life on Instagram, and then my name, Brayanna Jones, on LinkedIn.
Thank you. I am just so blown away with the conversation that we have had today, and I hope that it helped somebody out there. I know that it did. Again, this has been Rise and Lead Women's Leadership Perspectives.